there's more damning evidence that gain-of-function researchers were out to mislead accountability officers about what their real intentions were just before the pandemic. U.S. Right to Know reporter Emily Kopp is out with a brand new report detailing how these American scientists fooled the Pentagon about the research to be conducted at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, including by concealing that they intended to conduct the high-risk gain-of-function coronavirus research under lax safety standards in that lab just a year before the COVID-19 pandemic. This is according to documents obtained by Emily Kopp, which make that abundantly clear.
Scientist Elena Chan called these documents early drafts of the proposal that might have led to the pandemic. The U.S. government contractor and gain-of-function funder EcoHealth Alliance says Kopp's report is a nothing burger. More than that, they called it a falsehood. Quote, documents representing incomplete or early drafts of the proposal have been acquired via FOIA and published along with allegations regarding their intent. These allegations are false based on misunderstanding of edits and comments on the document and based on misleading out-of-context quotations and a lack of understanding of the process by which federal grants are awarded. Emily hit out at EcoHealth's characterization of her reporting, writing on Twitter this morning, EcoHealth Alliance's response to my story does not actually include any false statements, which is why they dodged my questions and didn't say anything until after the story was published. The statement argues that Diffuse wasn't funded, so it shouldn't matter that EcoHealth lied to DARPA and has been lying to the public for years. I disagree. So
I want to be very specific about what came out of this new report from Emily Kopp, because this is very damning to me. So this is in this Project Diffuse proposal. So they're trying to get approval for this proposal. And they say, so in a comment, this is the gain-of-function scientists kind of reviewing the proposal and like, how are we going to present it? And the comment is, if we win this contract, I do not propose that all of this work will necessarily be conducted by Ralph, that's Ralph Barrick, who is at UNC Chapel Hill. But I do want to stress the U.S. side of this proposal that so that DARPA are comfortable with our team. Once we get the funds, we can then allocate who does what exact work, and I believe that a lot of these assays can be done in Wuhan as well. So they are saying that once we get the grant approved, we can move a lot of this research to Wuhan. But we don't want to tell the approval committee that that's our plan. We're going to stress to them that the UNC Chapel Hill guy is on top of this and he's the lead researcher, and we're going to let them assume that what we mean is the research will be done here. That is pretty damning.
So the implication there, just to close the circle, is that the reason that they're saying it's going to happen in Wuhan is because they can have lower safety standards and they don't want to reveal that to folks who might have concerns about that reality, or is that not so explicit?
They might disagree that this, I don't know, they might take the position that no, it's just as fine, it's just as safe to do it in Wuhan, but they know that the approval committee will not like that it's being done predominantly in Wuhan. They know that could be a hang-up. So that means they know that people have legitimate concerns. I mean, obviously the concerns are legitimate. So they wanted to disguise that fact. They're not saying, they didn't put in the proposal, this is going to be significantly done in Wuhan. They know they have to cloak that fact.
Yeah.
And that is very concerning.
Yeah. So Kopp writes that one of the more indicting aspects of the FOIA draft proposal is that it, quote, proposed engineering high-risk coronaviruses of the same species as SARS and SARS-CoV-2. Most worrying to some scientists, the proposal involves synthesizing spike proteins with furin cleavage sites, the same feature that supercharged SARS-CoV-2 into the most infectious pandemic pathogen in history. And moreover, these concerns about whether or not the safety precautions are going to be sufficient if they are in Wuhan. All of those things combined do, at very least, I think, demand further investigation. If the comeback here is, well, these are just draft proposals, it wasn't put into effect. I mean, one, you haven't addressed the surrounding context of what's being written about here, which is the desire for certain parties not to know about the long-term plan, which has something to do with what's going into the actual content of the draft proposal. And two, well, do you have a subsequent finalized proposal that demonstrates that some of the concerns that are being raised here about the safety of the research itself and then the safety precautions around the research have actually been addressed? They quite obviously weren't.
Quite obviously not.
And that's the problem here. And is there going to be any accountability for the people who made these decisions?
There's another area of the proposal I wanted to flag where I believe this is Ralph Barrick making this comment on the proposal that, and this is a little bit technical, but in the U.S., these talking about the COVID strains and what what their classification would be for what they're able to do with them, and then notes that in China, we might be growing these viruses under a BSL-2. U.S. researchers would likely freak out. So that's an acknowledgement that it'll be easier to do this in China where the standards are more lax.
Yeah.
They know, they say right there, U.S. researchers will likely freak out.
Yeah. It's also horrific.
Maybe they're right to freak out.
How dark to understand that there are real safety implications here, but that maybe it's okay because it's the other side of the world. And to the extent that there is a leak, it's not going to be our people affected. I mean, as a pathologist, as someone who deals with infectious disease, if that is a part of the thinking, it is not just immoral, but deeply ignorant. How many diseases have we had so far that have had an origin in China? Because most people in the world live in China, whether it's avian flu, so many things originate on the other side of the world and manage to have global implications. The whole thing is just so dark and so despicable. And the fact that you have to be on the fringe of kind of journalism and media to even have a place to talk about these sorts of things still to this day is deeply frustrating.
Diseases cannot be used as a weapon because you cannot confine them, even if, I mean, I don't want anyone to be targeted by a weapon for disease, but it can blow back on your own population. It can take over the whole world. We still don't know the origins of some of the Spanish flu. There are theories that I think there are theories that it began in like Kansas or somewhere in the Midwest or the Great Plains in the U.S. But we don't know for sure. It could have come from China. It could have come from anywhere. Probably didn't come from Spain. They just called it that because Spain was the only place willing to like fairly report on these deaths of disease occurring during World War I. But it's the danger to the whole world is so fundamental, which is why there needs to be international cooperation and actual standards. Can't be like, oh, we got to do this in China. We'll be safe from it there. No, COVID killed millions of people worldwide. Every nation on earth was affected by this to some degree. And we can never let this happen again. And we should be so concerned about what our researchers were willing to do behind our backs and what they tried to get away with and what they're still getting away with. Yeah,
and I do think that the fact that very few people at all have taken up this charge, obviously, more so now than it used to be, but that so few people who are liberals have shown any interest in this is part of what has enabled the issue to be so marginalized.
Come on in, the water's fine.
Yeah, it's being characterized as a right issue when it
doesn't need to be at all.
Jeffrey Sachs is one of the few left-leaning people who has really been leading the charge on this. He was, of course, appointed to Lancet's investigative committee that was looking into lab leak origin, and I think probably surprised a lot of people there institutionally when he saw a there and has continued to push for this. And I'm so grateful for him and others who are left-leaning, who are willing to talk about this issue without the partisan lens on it. But truly, the failure of Democrats to be interested in holding their own hearings and holding their own investigations is part of what has allowed this miscarriage of justice to continue unplumbed now for almost 4 years out.
Absolutely. No, thank you for calling attention to that. Very important stuff. That does it for us for today on Rising. Tomorrow promises to bring even more news that we'll be happy to share with you, including our wonderful takes, which we hope you appreciate so much.
Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who prefer to listen while you're on the go, we're now available anywhere you listen to podcasts.
See you tomorrow.
Take care.